Hey, MBA hopefuls. Welcome to MBA Waves. We are live on the air. My name is Eric Lucrezia, and today on episode 155, we're excited to introduce IESE Business School in Barcelona, Spain. And this week, we have with us the Director of Admissions, Paula Amorim, and two fantastic alumni. Mike, I'm not going to pronounce your name right. I'm sorry. You can tell us later. And we have also Diane. Mike graduated in 2017 and Diane in 2023. And as always, I have my two fantastic co-hosts, Bara and Krithika. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
Hello. Hi.
So let's dive right into this. What is new and exciting at IESE? Maybe Paula, you'd like to get us started off.
Yes. Well, I think it's nice if we start talking about the increase in our class. So the cohort that we just welcomed in this September is the biggest that we've ever had. So we're now at 6 sections, so 400 and now 40 students, with the highest percentage of women that we've ever had. So we now reached the 40%. So there were a lot of renovations on campus. And we have new bathrooms for women. So that was something thoughtful that the IESE decided to do. Since we were increasing the number of women on campus, we also did some adaptations so that it could fit everyone. So this is our most exciting news, that the class has increased because we have seen a rise in applications, and not only in terms of quantity, but also quality, right? So that's also why we decided to increase, because we felt that we had space to keep increasing and growing with the quality that we had.
Excellent.
When you say that you have 7 sections, does that mean that those are 7 cohorts? And are the cohorts like, how is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, no, it's actually 6, but it's actually 6 classrooms. So it's one cohort, but then we're not going to put the 440 in the same classroom. So we split them in sections of 70, right? So, well, now with 440 is a little bit more per section, but the standard number per classroom is 70 students. Yeah.
Got it.
And then we have more than 50 nationalities. It's a very good split between the regions. I think that's also something that makes IESE quite unique and special, is that we have a very good balance across the region. So we usually have 37% of people coming from the Americas, another 30% coming from EMEA, and then the rest coming from Asia and Oceania. So you don't have, it's not heavily leaned towards one region, right? So it's a really good mix of nationalities and cultures, and you're constantly exchanging with people that are very different and very interesting to learn from.
I remember when we were there this summer that some of the students talked about that kind of cross-cultural exchange of learning about each other. So it's really wonderful. And that really, really dovetails in what I wanted to ask about. What do you offer that sets you apart in Spain with other business schools in Spain and also other business schools in Europe?
Yeah. So I think that there are a couple of things that makes us special, and I'm sure that Mike and Diane can also go deeper on this. I'm an alumna myself, so by the way, so I call IESE my Neverland, because I came and I didn't want to leave and grow up, so I just stayed. So I'm class 2016, so Mike and I actually shared campus for a year. And I think there are a couple of things that makes IESE quite unique. One is the fact that we use the case method, right? So this means that with basically every single class that you're going to have will be a case discussion. And this implies a much more interactive and engaging moments in the classroom, right? It's not just a one-way conversation where it's one professor that holds the absolute truth and you just have to be there and listen, right? No, it's actually you go, you prepare the case, and a case is basically a problem that someone is facing at some point in time, right? So you have to put yourself in the shoes of that person, think with your head and your experience and your lenses, and decide what you would do. And then you go into your team meeting, and then you discuss with your team. This team is fixed throughout the first year, and it's assigned by IESE so that we can guarantee a good mix of nationalities, backgrounds, right, profiles, so that it's the most diverse that it can be. And then you go into your 70 person section to discuss with the larger group, right? So this makes learning very practical. It doesn't feel like you are outside of the job market. And I think that this is very important, because I know that this is something that comes up very often in the minds and as concerns for candidates, right? Like, I don't know if I would like to stop working for a year or a year and a half. And to be honest, I think that you're actually very much in the job market, because you're learning the very latest trends, right? So the case method makes it very engaging and interesting and exciting. Um, and the fact that you are in this very diverse environment makes it even more exciting, right? Because everyone will have different lenses and perspectives and angles towards a case. So you are learning from each other. And I think that this makes relationships and bonds get even stronger, right? Because yes, you have all this diversity in the classroom, and they are actually being used, right? People are actually sharing their experiences, and this makes you to get to know people better, right? Because you know that that person used to work in aviation, that other person used to work in marketing, and then so their communication style, what they've done in their lives. So this really makes the relationships stronger. And I think that the third, so it's the diversity, the case method, and then obviously the culture. I think that IESE is, well, I don't think IESE is a mission-driven school. So this means that we are very committed to creating positive impact in the world, and we want to bring people that have also that that desire and that passion to make their career something greater than just their own benefit and profit, right? And a big salary and a big bonus, which it's fine, we can have. But we do want people that want to have this that have this drive for something more, right? Because the collaborative spirit is very important at IESE. So it's really a dynamic, right? It's the whole aura that the IESE has, with all these aspects, that makes it really special. And then people really learn from each other, and they learn that we learn, I'm going to put myself in that, because this was actually a very deep learning that I got from IESE in practice, not only someone telling me or discussing in a case. You do learn that you can collaborate and succeed, right? So it is possible to work together and to support each other, right? Even if you are applying for the same job position. I remember we would apply, and then we would go into the interview, and then we would come out and we would share the interview questions with each other, right? So it's really an environment where you really want all your classmates to thrive, because you feel that they want it too for you, right? So I feel that this whole aura and an ecosystem that we have at IESE really makes it special.
That's great. I we haven't even touched upon Barcelona and being in this amazing world-class city. But I'd love to, before we even launch anywhere else, I'd love to hear from maybe Diane. You can talk about a case method that you worked on, that you learned from or inspired by or transformed by, that you feel that would illustrate some of this.
For sure, yeah. Case method is one of the main reasons why I joined. I think it's the case for many other students, to be honest. It's something that really sets IESE apart. And what's really special also is that really all classes are case method, right? So you can have a case on a topic that's more maybe people related, and that's going to be more of an HR class and so on. So that's super unique. Before the MBA, I was not used to public speaking at all, pretty shy, pretty quiet. It was really scary, right? To enter a class and there's a bunch of strangers and I have to share something, and what do I even know, right? And I think that's what the case method was all about for me, but I guess actually that's the whole point of the system, right? When I first started, I was sitting on the last row. In first year, the seats are assigned. And I was just so scared, right? Like if I'm on the last row, that means that I don't get to, like, I'm going to have to scream, and how is it going to work? I was just overthinking this whole thing. And of course, also I don't know everything, so scared to get it wrong. And my first, feedback I got from a prof was, hey, you need to speak more. You need to be more, just like share your opinion in the class. And then I just forced myself. I just told myself, every single class, say at least one thing. And actually, when you say one thing, most likely you're going to say more things because you start getting maybe into a conversation. And so that was a huge learning for me, just contributing. And again, I don't know everything, far from it, but maybe just asking a question can start a conversation, and then somebody who's actually an expert in this can share. And then from my point of view, which is an outsider one, maybe I can still contribute and challenge and look at it from another angle. So it was really scary. It was a challenge in the first place, but I think it was one of my biggest learning. And for sure, it's helped me now when I'm working and even throughout the MBA in the different activities, just having a voice and being less scared of speaking up.
Diane, I just want to say, I think that's really smart advice and really useful to our audience. Like as an MBA student going into it, it can be super intimidating. And like people who have not yet applied yet or are going through the process can see, oh, IESE is, this amazing school. It's super well ranked. It's super prestigious and so on. Like these people must all be like top. And you're like being really honest and vulnerable and sharing how when you started this program that you were intimidated. And, I think that resonate with a lot of people. Secondly, you also said about sort of the way I took it is making a commitment to say at least one thing per class. And I think that's not such a big ask, right? So I'm just going to say one thing. And that sort of sets the stage that you're going to contribute at least once. And then the other part of it was that you'll probably say more if you say one thing, because you're engaging in a conversation. I think that is so smart. And so thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
You were also in the back of the classroom, which is a really easy way to hide out, right? So I think it really speaks to making that transformation. And what were you doing before you were at IESE?
Yeah, I was in data. So I was a data scientist turned project manager. And actually, I had gotten that feedback in the past, right? You should speak up more in meetings. It shows that, you have an opinion. And of course, I had feedback and I took it. But yeah, the MBA forced me. And as you said, I was on the last row, something that's pretty cool. Maybe not everybody knows. Every semester, we change seats. And so first I was in the last row, then I was in the very first row, which was also its own experience, and then middle of the class. But regardless, we have to speak, right? And so, yeah, it was a nice challenge.
Yeah, I'm all for the cold calling. So Mike, would you want to kick us off with some ideas about how students customize their experiences to align with the personal career goals, starting with your own journey?
Sure. Thank you. So I'm Mike. I am originally from the US, but I've lived here in Spain since the MBA. I finished in 2017. And just for some context, after I graduated the program, I'm a consultant by trade. I worked in consulting for 5 years in New York. And then after I graduated the program, I actually worked for the school in the careers department for a few years before moving on to Boston Consulting Group, where I led recruiting for Southern Europe Masters and MBAs for a few years. And now I'm on the people strategy team. So careers is really at the core of my entire post-MBA journey. So it's more than just, what I did, but more, I see it kind of from a broader picture, I would say. I think one thing that's really beneficial when you're looking at MBAs is to really understand how decided you are in what you're looking to try to do. So for me, I came into the MBA with a hypothesis that I wanted to leave consulting and break into the field of media. And I had a great internship with a great media agency working for a pretty famous actor, helping them with their kind of, let's say, financial strategy. But it really taught me that media is a very unstructured industry, and I'm a very structured guy. So I'm very grateful that I was in a 2-year program that gave me the opportunity to test my hypothesis, because I had to start over my job hunt in second year. And for me, that was really important. So then I kind of fell in love with this idea of career coaching and people development. And I pursued that first at IESE and then at BCG. But I do think that for my journey, certainly it is this idea of having that opportunity to test a hypothesis. I think for what IESE does really well in the first year is it offers tracks in careers. So right away, you can kind of put yourself on the consulting track, which tends to recruit quite early. There's also an investment banking track, also because it's an early recruiting industry as well. And then there's a tech track, and then we call it diversified industries. So if you're not exactly sure what you're looking to try to do, you could put yourself on that. Or if you know what you want and it's something like sustainable agriculture in Thailand, maybe that's going to be the more generalist path that you can put yourself on to learn things like networking. Students can also put themselves on more than one. So there's a lot of flexibility for people to be able to both dive deep if they know what they're looking for, or explore if you're a little bit more unsure.
Mike, you brought up a really interesting point. The fact that you ended up wanting to go for something in media and then later learned that it wasn't for you, having to start the process again midway. A, fortunately, you were in a 2-year program. And B, it sort of underscores the point about knowing what you want before you begin. And I think that's why, from an admissions perspective, and I bet Paula will back me up on this, is that if somebody doesn't really know what they want, their goals are not clearly defined or they're not realistic, it's kind of a red flag. So as an applicant, you really want to, think through your goals as much as possible to avoid that kind of situation. It sounds like Mike, he wanted to go for something that he probably did a lot of research, but by truly testing it out in that internship, he found there was a mismatch there and he found his way. So that's really great. And also great to have a careers team to help you walk that journey. So that's all really great. I wanted to ask, whoever wants to answer this could be.
Actually,
go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, could I challenge you on something you just said? Because I don't, so the idea that you need to know what you want when you join an MBA, you need to say something in an MBA admissions essay that's very specific to be able to get in. But I would say that most MBAs I've worked with, and many people that try to break into the consulting industry, in fact, don't know what they want. So you have to have a hypothesis. And the MBA is about testing that hypothesis. But I would actually say a large majority of students at all of the schools that I've recruited at, when you really push them, they aren't exactly sure. I think the MBA is a great way to also learn and develop that. I understand that when you're applying, it's really important for you to show some certainty or at least articulate that you know directionally where you want to go. But I do not believe that I would say a large majority of MBA students don't have deep clarity in what they're looking for. And that's okay. That's what this is all for.
Mike, I'm 47. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So it's fine.
Yeah. And then if I can add, Eric, on the admissions piece, of course, nothing that you write in the essay is binding, right? We're not going to be chasing you, saying you put this in your career essay, in your application, saying that this is what you wanted. But from us in the admissions committee, it's important for us to see if the person actually had a good reflection process. right? And I think that this is only beneficial to the candidates themselves, right? Because this is something that eventually they will have to do. So it's only bringing you a little further or one step ahead to something that you'll have to do in the MBA anyway, right? So this is something that we highly encourage students is, okay, you have the hypothesis. Maybe when you're starting the application process, you have 3 hypotheses. So then you can use the application process to already try to test some of them or the 3 of them by talking to alumni, talking to current students, talking to friends that work in these industries. And then from there, okay, maybe you can shortlist. And then from 3, you come to 2, because it's nice also to have plan A and plan B. This is something that we usually ask in the interview. Okay, if you don't get your plan A, what's your plan B, right? So we're trying to see the soundness of people's plans and how much they've actually researched on them. Yes. Because yes, it can be very much like very abstract and very dreamy and very unrealistic. I was that candidate, and it's true. And again, I was one, then my hypothesis also didn't come true, but because I thought that I was coming from consulting, I wanted a career in impact, so I just merged both, and that's what I put in my application, in my career essay, right? I want impact consulting, but it was an impact consulting that I actually wanted. And then I also realized that impact consulting is a long shot, right? It's not that frequent, right? So I had many assumptions that were not true, right? And these are assumptions that you can test if you put a little bit more effort into talking to people, alumni, students, friends, right? And test them. This is what we're asking. Even if you want urban farming in Thailand, right? Like, tell me how you would get there, right? So what is the research? Do you know the companies? How? And then if you have good answers, it's fine. You're probably not going to go there anyway, right? So, but I think that it's just something else that we are testing.
I mean, by writing about these things in your essays, it's sort of demonstrating you have the capacity to think through your career into the future in the short, medium,
Exactly.
long term, the various, and like, once you've been able to do it once, you can do that process again.
Exactly.
Yeah, Paula, when you were speaking, I really am very happy about the empathy and compassion you show for applicants, because some of them are like very clueless to begin with. They know what they don't want, but they may not know like where they're headed. So that gives a lot of confidence to applicants. I was curious about what are other avenues for testing this hypothesis. Like you have the ESA internship program and so on. Similarly, can probably Diane and Mike as well add about what are the other avenues for you to test the various ways of identifying different career tracks for you post MBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we can talk about are activities on campus, like clubs. There's different professional clubs, consulting club, finance club, tech club, also women in business club, art for business club, those types of things where you might meet with people who are curious about the same things as you are, right? And those clubs will organize several things, often in partnership with the school. For example, panels where people who were maybe in the MBA and then went to those careers, how was their experience? What did that mean? And how that impacted them and stuff. So you're not having such a big commitment as, an internship and spending 3 months there, right? But you're spending maybe an hour and listening to it and seeing, does that resonate with what I want to do? There's also conferences, and similarly, you can connect with people, hear great talks, and network. Networking is a huge keyword in the experience. Then we have treks also organized by the clubs where you might travel and visit some company offices and learn about working there. So a bit of a messy answer because there's so many things, right? But we get in contact with so many people who have such a varied experience, and that's such a great way to understand what's out there. And also, do I see myself there?
Yeah, and maybe I would just add simply the diversity of the class. I know that we had talked a little bit about Barcelona. Barcelona is a city that brings people together because most people are coming here, even from certain parts of Spain, without any community already in Barcelona. So everybody is coming without anyone that they already know. So that brings the community together really quickly. And it breaks down those cultural barriers really fast. And the reason why I bring that up, because talking about careers, is one of the first people that ever challenged me on my thought process behind media was someone from another country who I was kind of talking very casually. He was a friend already. And it was a country, let's say, that has a stereotype for being relatively direct. And basically what he said is, Mike, it doesn't really sound like you've thought about this that much. And I'm coming from the US, where everybody will always say, oh my gosh, it's amazing. How awesome. How great. And this person's coming from a very different culture that is a little bit more honest and straight to the punch. And for me, that was the first time that I'd ever been challenged on something like this, because it was new. And having that diversity of culture really does allow you to challenge your own perceptions really quickly.
Mike, where are you from in the United States?
About an hour north of New York City.
Okay. So you've got that confrontational piece, though.
Compared to people in Eastern Europe, not at all. Not at all.
I mean, for me, I'm a New Yorker. Also, I'm from the East Coast, and I'm in California. So I feel like I'm in a foreign country sometimes. So I get exactly what you're saying. Californians are very different about confrontation. So we talked a little bit about Barcelona, and we've talked a little bit about these clubs. I'm wondering if you could talk about the global network of allied business schools, right? So it's a little bit of a departure of where we're talking about, but it's still in the same framework of what are you doing with other business schools, and what's the student experience in the program?
Okay, so maybe I can answer that because so we have different partnerships with schools around the world, right? And these partnerships will also be different depending on the program, right? So we have, for example, the CEO program with MIT. And in the MBA, the partnership that we have with MIT is for an exchange program in the second year, right? So with different business schools, we have different agreements. We have what we call our associated schools or our sister schools. These are schools that are spread around the world, mostly are in emerging markets. And these were schools that the IESE helped found. So these are schools that will use the case method, right? That sort of have this philosophy of using a humanistic approach to business. So there is an alignment in terms of philosophy, vision of the world, and methodology, right? So we have Lagos Business School in Nigeria. We have Strathmore University in Nairobi. We have IPADE in Mexico. So we have different around the world. We have CEIBS in Shanghai that just turned 30 last week, and our dean was there for their 30th anniversary. So these are schools that we have a more direct relationship and action. And then how this sort of intersects with the MBA program is basically with either exchange, because in CEIBS we do have an exchange program in the second year, but also the international modules. So the international modules in the second year, they are intensive classes. So it's one intensive week that you go to another country, right? So the idea is that the students get exposed to the corporate culture on how to do business in Africa, in Brazil, in Latin America, Mexico, in Asia, right? So last week, our students were in Hong Kong, in New York, in Mexico. So for now, this year, we hosted 4 One of them was in our New York campus, actually. So that's not an associated school. That's our own campus. They run different programs there, but we have this 1 week of intersection with our New York campus. And then we have the many partnerships. It's more than 30, so I cannot name them all, for the global exchange program in the second year, right? So this is basically, literally, an exchange program. So for one of the terms in the second year, instead of being at IESE doing their electives, you're in another school. So we have partnership with the schools around the world, but the biggest concentration is obviously in the US, right? Because that's where most of the schools are. So, and then out of the top schools in the US that have exchange programs, we have partnership with all of them, right? So NYU, Columbia, MIT, Wharton, Chicago Booth, Berkeley, UCLA, Duke, Tuck, Yale, there are many. Yes.
It's funny you mentioned the New York campus. I was just in New York. I flew in actually today. I was visiting family, and I happened to be in Midtown, and I saw the flag, the IESE.
The big flag, yes, in front of Carnegie Hall. Yes, yeah, they found a good spot.
I mean, professionally, it's such a great location because of all the opportunities for interviewing for the companies there, but also Central Park is right there. It's just such a great spot.
Yes, it's a block from there.
Mike, you mentioned you were from an hour north of New York. I spent 3-4 days in the Hudson Valley, so I just came back.
That's where I'm from. That's exactly where I'm from.
Beautiful spot. Love it up there. So, Mike and Diane as well. What are some of your favorite classes that you experienced at IESE? And how do projects or professors that you're working with bring up some of the current challenges the world is facing? And how do you dive into things like climate change, sustainability, even politics, wars, like some of the heavy stuff, I think, where business has a role to play in making things better for humanity?
Yeah, I could bring up two highlights. One of them is a geopolitics course, strategy and geopolitics. I see Diane nodding. I have a feeling she was thinking of this one too. It's a course that's taught in double blocks. So there's kind of two classes back to back. The first class, you're learning a little bit about the geopolitical situation of a region. And the second class, you're doing a case within the context of that region's geopolitics. What's interesting is the professor will invite people from that region to attend the class, even if they're not enrolled in it. So when we discuss East Asia, China, Taiwan, it is full of people from those countries. When we discuss the Middle East, we have people from Israel, people from Saudi Arabia, people that have Palestinian origin. So it becomes a very intense conversation, but the IESE community is really collaborative. So it's intense, but it's also really enlightening. The other class that I really enjoyed was called From Adam Smith to Pope Francis, which was taught by an atheist economist and someone that works in the Vatican. So two very different teachers who talked through economic policy in the context of not only religion, but also how religion and economics have intertwined, and it was very interesting to see their two very different belief systems. But again, super collaborative, even if people didn't agree.
I'm going to ask all the politicians to take these courses.
That would be nice, right?
They need it. Yeah.
Mike, since we still have you on here, can you talk a little bit about your experience that we were just talking about with going abroad and any sort of partnerships? I think you went to Dubai, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I went to Kenya. So the Kenya module was 2 weeks. The first week was classes at Strathmore Business School, which is a partnered school. And the second was an consulting engagement where we worked with a company on small teams to solve a problem. It was probably my favorite experience in the entirety of the MBA. Just really, really, really teaches you a lot. The way we talk about Africa as a country, even though it's a continent, is really challenging. And I think most people that haven't gone there and talked to people there really view it as a monolith where it is anything but. And one of the highlights of the experience was the students of the local business school, we did kind of a negotiations with them. So they broke out the students based on their nationality group. So it was the Americans and the Kenyans, and then the Spanish and the Kenyans, and the East Asians and the Kenyans. So they had different nationality groups have discussions and negotiations around investing in a Kenyan company. And then they had the Kenyan students come and give their feelings and their thoughts and their, I guess, feedback on how different nationality groups were discussing with them and their impressions as a result. And I mean, it was really interesting and just not something you get to do ever, ever, ever.
Neat. I want to leapfrog to Diane now. What was your experience with the abroad program?
Yeah, I also went abroad. Just to clarify, if you're confused, you don't have to go abroad. It's optional and something that Mike and I happen to choose to do. I went to Dubai for 2 weeks. It was also a really great program, but my format was different than yours. Mike, I don't think, and I could be wrong, it's been a bit of time. I don't think it was partnered with a school there. However, we did have classes, usually in the morning, and in the afternoon we would have excursions. So going to a museum, going to a market, going to trying different types of food, stuff like that. It was a really cool experience. When it was more of a formal class environment, we were working on a project. We had a project, of course. We were learning from people who were working in Dubai. Maybe they even did an MBA before, so we could understand what does that look like, moving to Dubai post-MBA. And also we learned about the culture, and that was super interesting, super insightful. And actually quite a few people after the MBA may move to Dubai, right? There's opportunities there. Of course, and so it's a nice way to, go there and understand what will that mean, right? And will I have a network there, and what does that look like, type of thing. So that was really, really interesting. In terms of favorite classes, geopolitics was one that I wanted to mention, so Mike already got that one. And there's a class called Power. I don't know if you did it, Mike or Paula, but super powerful class. It's in the name. All about how to have a presence in the corporate world, right? And have an impact, have an influence on people. And so that relates to also some behavioral analysis. And it was just super interesting and unexpected. I didn't think going to business school meant I would learn how to feel and be more powerful. And so just lots of unexpected learnings, super interesting.
I like those learnings when you're not quite expecting them, right? Those wind up being super impactful. Can we talk a little bit, can we jump, like leapfrog over to the logistics of applying to the school, and like what are the test requirements? What's your take on the new GMAT focus? Just kind of getting an idea of what you expect and what's important for the admissions team.
Okay, so I can take that. So in terms of requirements, we have probably the conventional requirements, so GMAT or GRE. If you are not a native speaker or haven't worked 2 years in an English-speaking country, or have done your undergrad in English, you will need an English test. And so either a TOEFL, IELTS, CP that you have to submit. And then you go into the filling out the form, right? Which is probably a long process, but a very important one as well. We have one mandatory essay, written essay about careers. So this is the moment that you will have to tell us what you plan to do after your MBA. And then if you want to apply for a scholarship, then you have to write an essay on scholarship, on how do you plan to finance your MBA and why do you think you deserve a scholarship. So this is a bit of the more selling point that you have in the application. It's the moment where you're really going to highlight your merits. It's also the moment where you can highlight your needs, right? So, and I tend to encourage people to focus on the very individual needs, right? If you're coming from an emerging market country, we know that your currency is weak, and we have a very international team in my team, right? So my team is very international, so we usually have people from the region covering the region, right? So we have a Latin American that is covering Latin America. We have a Nigeria covering Africa. So we know what's happening in the region. So this is just to save words, right? I think that there can be a better use of your word count if you say, I still have undergraduate debt, or I pay for my siblings' education, or I have some medical bills that I'm paying. So these are points that will be relevant when we are considering the need part, right? And then we have an optional essay written that you can write about anything that you would like to. Yeah. And then it comes after you click submit, you will receive a link to answer some video essays. So we will basically be asking how to pronounce your name, because we got tired of butchering people's names. So we play that video many times before we start an interview. And then you have to introduce yourself, and then there will be 2 random questions. So we have a very large bank of questions that my face will pop up. So I already apologize that my face is going to be very present throughout the whole application process. So my face pops out, and I ask you a question. Yeah? And then you have 1 minute to answer, to prepare, and 1.5 minutes to answer. Yeah. No need to freak out. I would, because I hate video essays. So if I was an applicant and it was doing this to me, I would hate it. But you don't have to, because these are questions that you would get in an interview, right? So you still have the advantage of having 1 minute to prepare, because in an interview you don't have 1 minute, right? You can think for like 5 seconds, and more than 20, it becomes a bit awkward. But so it's nothing super complex. It's mostly us trying to understand a little bit of your style, your communication, your English, right? A little bit of your personality, of course, right? Before we go into the interview. Yeah. And that's basically it. So this is the application part. Once you click submit and you do the video essays, then it gets to my team. My team will review all the applications and decide the ones that we're going to interview and invite for the assessment day. So the assessment day is something that I also wanted to mention, because it's basically a group dynamic, right? So I think that every step of the process that we have, we are really trying to go a little bit deeper in understanding who the candidate is, right? So the video essay is because of this, the assessment day is because of this. So the assessment gives us a different perspective of the candidate, right? Which is not just sitting in front of the computer or face-to-face and answering questions, right? So you're working in a team on a project. Mike has been helping us for the past year in the Barcelona assessment day. So he's always bringing you problems and challenges and moderating the session. So it's really about seeing how people work on teams, because as we've spoken so far, teams are very important at IESE. And we need to make sure that, for example, I think that this geopolitics class is very interesting, because this is extreme, right? Because you literally have maybe 2 nationalities that are in conflict having a conversation on sort of a setup environment. But this is something that might happen naturally in the program, right? And it is really about IESE's mission, and I've heard the dean say this, that we are trying to build this idea and feeling of shared humanity, right? That you might, everyone is entitled of their own opinion, but you have to respect, you have to be empathetic, right? You have to listen. And maybe, who knows, maybe you change your mind, right? Or maybe you don't change your mind, but at least you've heard another side, right? So I feel that this makes us much more human, much more understanding and empathetic. And then when we have a world conflict, this actually it affects us, right? Because it is very likely that you will have a friend that is from the country that is in conflict now, right? So I think that this really makes us better human beings, and there is obviously consequences in leadership for that. Yeah. So sorry, I went a bit around, but I just wanted to say that these are things that we are testing during the application process, right? We want to know if you are put in this situation, how would you handle it, right? So how would you behave? Would you fit? Do we think that you would be open to listening to other perspectives and points of view? Or would you be very closed in your view of the world without listening and just stuck, right? And
Don't apologize, Paula. That's very useful. I think our listeners and our audience are very interested to hear that. Also, your points about the video essays, which can be super unnerving for people. That I think most schools, they just want to get a sense of how you are thinking on your feet, and when you don't have 3 months to prepare an essay. And speaking of essays, I just wanted to come back to the goals essay. Earlier on, you mentioned how in the interview you might get asked, what's your plan B? At IESE, are you and your team happy to hear about a plan A, plan B, plan C in an essay at that stage, or is it more something you'd rather have at the interview stage?
Yeah, I think you can mention plan, like if you have a plan C and it's very, yes, you can, but you don't have to force yourself either, right? Especially because if you have a very sound plan A, I think probably a plan B is enough, right? It's sufficient.
Absolutely, so I see it.
But yeah, I think that you can dive deeper a little bit.
Yeah, if necessary.
What I liked about the ESA process is it kind of mirrors what would happen in the case study driven program later on, in terms of testing for all the pieces. So I would like to know more about the experiences of the assessment day, Diane and Mike. For you.
Sure. I do want to just comment on the GMAT, that just for everyone that's listening, I know you could take the GRE. I know there are schools where you might not have to take the GMAT. One thing that a lot of candidates do not know is that consulting firms look at your GMAT score. I have screened thousands of MBA profiles, and we look at it. And especially if you're coming from a non-traditional background, then if you're coming from something where you didn't have a lot of analytical experience, or maybe your undergraduate GPA is not perfect, but your goal is to try to go into consulting, maybe investment banking, firms will look at that. So it's worth it to really invest time in trying to get that done. In terms of my assessment day, it's a really fun experience. Two of the people that I did the assessment with were my first year roommates. Eventually, I've been to 3 or 4 weddings of people that went to my assessment day. So, the experience is really wonderful. I think it simulates the experience really great. And I'm involved with it in Barcelona. So if anyone listening ever is coming to an ESA assessment day in the future, maybe you'll see both of us.
Nice.
Excellent.
I just wanted to come back to your point about the GMAT. So if somebody doesn't have a GMAT score and wants to get into consulting, do you think after they get into B school, they should go for it?
I think that hopefully people listening right now will hear this and not be in that situation, because I have worked with many people that find themselves in that situation. If they have a background in consulting or data analytics or something more technical, then it's probably not a big deal. But if you have a more soft skills background and you don't have a strong test score or a strong academic GPA to back you up, breaking into the big firms is complicated. And it's just, I can't tell you how many people I've seen that didn't realize that this has a downstream effect, and it's not just to get you into school.
Yeah, Mike, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is something I talk about with my clients all the time. If you're considering taking a waiver, depending on what your goal is, and not just consulting, but also some of the top investment banking firms. Even I've heard private equity, but it's really the high level companies. Like if you're talking MBBs, right? And please tell me if I'm wrong. If you think it's more across the board.
In consulting, it's across the board. In the rest, but it's all about your individual profile. It's if you have never shown that you can achieve academically for whatever reason, or that you don't have a very quantitative background, having a really nice GMAT score rounds out your application, not only for business school, but for targeting companies in the future. And it's not a requirement, but it really helps round your profile out.
It also plays a role in scholarships. So
it does.
Yeah.
How about GRE? I mean, I know that the GMAT has that importance, but are the consultant groups looking at GRE? And Paula, how are you looking at the GRE? Are you agnostic about the GRE and the GMAT?
Go for it, Paula.
Well, yes, we are agnostic. So we look at it the same way, GMAT or GRE. So whatever is a better fit for the person, go for it. But maybe Mike has a different opinion.
I'm going to say something very honestly. I see it not at IESE, across the board with business schools. I think students sometimes get a lower score on the GRE, and because not everybody fully understands it, maybe they find that's a kind of way to maneuver into an admission slot. Every consulting firm I know has a conversion. And I mean, if you can get a really good score on the GRE, my biggest piece of advice in your resume, put GRE 328 parentheses your percentile. Like list it out on your resume very clearly what the percentile is, but don't expect that companies won't do a conversion if you have a low GRE and you're kind of just playing some games. I think business schools will too, I'm sure, Paula.
Yes. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks, Mike. That's very interesting. Paula, last time we saw each other was in Barcelona in May at the AGAT conference, where IESE so graciously hosted us. And that was a wonderful event. And thank you again. During one of the conversations about testing, the EA came up, the executive assessment. And there's a growing number of schools in the States that are accepting those. I would say about almost 10 at this point. I don't know, there was sort of a buzz of maybe some of the European schools will start considering that. Has there been any movement on that with IESE?
There hasn't been any movement, no. Every year when we're about to launch the application, the new application for the next cycle, we talk about it, but then also because we have such a diverse and such an international pool of candidates that the executive assessment might have different or might cause different impressions or perceptions from different nationalities around the world, right? So, and this is why I've never felt super confident to just say we are doing it, while I have my team in Asia saying this is not going to look good for the brand here in Asia. I'm like, well, then if it's not, I think that probably the gain would be marginal, and we're still trying to strengthen the brand in Asia. So like if it's gonna play against, I prefer to play safe and not have it, right? So for now, it's on hold.
Sorry, I was on mute. Good to know. Thank you for updating us there.
And Diane, how was your assessment? I believe you didn't have an assessment day, but how was your interview experience?
Yeah, it was all good. When I first registered interest, somebody from Paola's team reached out to me. And so it wasn't quite an interview, but it was a great way to start talking to the admissions team. So that was really nice. And it also made me a bit more confident for the interviews because I had already talked to somebody from the IESE side. Also, I have a coworker who gave me a tip a few months ago, and I just really love this tip, so I share it to everybody. Whether you're talking at a conference or if you have an interview, the audience or the person across the screen from you is rooting for you. They really want you to do amazing because why are we here otherwise, right? So I don't know what's actually in the admission team's mind as they're interviewing me, but at least that's what I tell myself when I'm in that situation. They're rooting for me. So yeah, this is a positive environment. So it was just a nice, super nice tip from my coworker. Really loved it.
I love that too. Like it's about like how they're here to admit and not to deny.
Exactly. No, and that's actually a great point, Diane, because if you've passed the filter and have been invited for an interview, it means that we would like to admit you, right? If you don't bomb the interview or don't show any red flags, right? Like for us, it's much better to have a positive interview that we're going to. And this serves, like now, I have recruited many people for my team, right? I've been doing this for almost 5 years. And that's it. Every interview you enter, you really want that candidate to be your candidate, right? So because you don't want to be recruiting. That's the truth, right? Like you want to go in and you want to find the best candidate, right? So I feel that many times as candidates, we don't have that perception and that idea. And we're always thinking that the recruiter is trying to trick us, right? And well, Mike has probably seen more like as a proper recruiter for a company than I have. But what do you think, Mike? Is that the overall sentiment that the recruiter is going with in the...
I love that comment, Diane. I think I totally agree. I think nervousness is the biggest downfall to MBA admissions interviews, to consulting interviews, or anything else. People just get in their head and they just defeat themselves with nerves. And the reality is, you're right, that people want to close processes quickly. It would be beneficial if we did fewer interviews and more successes. That's not how it always turns out in the industry that I'm in, but that would be great if everyone overperformed. And I think sometimes people don't recognize that.
So speaking about alumni, I'd love to ask about the alumni network and how has the network helped to, job offers basically in different career fields? Mike, I guess you kind of are on both sides of it, right? So you're quite an asset to ESA, I imagine, in that sense.
Yeah, look, I think ESA's historically been a smaller school. It's gotten much bigger now. But I will say that in certain countries, ESA doesn't have as many alumni as other institutions. What I do think is precisely because there are fewer alumni, our alumni are on average more engaged. My batch graduated 8 years ago, which is terrifying for me to say. But I mean, I know that I would say 80% of them are in touch with the school in some capacity. It's a high percentage. And most of the ones that aren't are just not in a place where people really reach out to them. They're doing something that people just don't find them all the time. So I feel really strongly that the alumni network, while small, is very powerful and certainly growing.
How many were in your batch when you graduated?
270.
270. And Diane?
350. And now 440. So clearly we see the trends.
Sounds like our admissions director is doing a really good job.
I always say great admissions team. Great admissions team. Yeah, and now...
I'm sorry, just going with the alumni thing, I wanted to ask, what about the events, the culture of the alumni? What do you guys get to see each other? How often do online events? Are there local chapters doing stuff in Berlin, for example, where you are, Diane?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's also a big factor why people are interested in joining ESA. I think you mentioned the culture, Paula, earlier. It's part of it, right? So people are so willing to chat. It's super easy to understand what's the experience during, after the MBA and so on. In Berlin, we do have a chapter. It's not the biggest. We do have a barbecue a couple times a year. That's super fun. And just yesterday, for example, I had dinner with somebody who's an alumna, and she wasn't in my class, right? So just so many ways to catch up with people and to not feel like you don't know anybody in your new city. So it's such a powerful network.
Yeah. And then you also have the more official and big events that the alumni department organizes, right? So, for example, this Thursday and Friday, there will be the Global Alumni Reunion happening. This year is going to be in Madrid. So it's usually 1 year in Madrid, 1 year in Barcelona, 1 year somewhere else. And then it's basically a big conference, right? So you have a big theme, and then alumni get together to like for content. IESE has a big drive for academics, right? So there's usually content behind. And then you have the reunions. So people that have graduated in, how do you call the quinquennios? I don't know the word for in English for quinquennios. So
every 5 years.
Every 5 years, thank you. So every 5 years. So the ones have graduated 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. IESE also hosts a big party here in Barcelona. And then they keep in touch, right? Now, we were talking about interviews. We also have alumni interviewing for the school now. So it's been 2 years that the alumni are involved. And it is amazing how excited they were to start interviewing for free. Yeah, like we don't pay alumni, and like they offer their time for free for us. And it's really amazing to see how grateful they feel to be part of IESE, right? So there's really this giving back feeling and sentiment for the school, because the experience that we have on campus is so special and it's so transformative that everyone wants to be a part of the next generation, right? Like put their own brick. But also I feel that whenever you need something or you're in the look for someone, or just the fact that you have done IESE, even if you don't know the person, you just feel like helping, right? So this bond is extremely strong.
Before we hop off, because we're already over, but I'd love to know what is one tip that the three of you would each give to our MBA hopefuls in their application process and anything that has to do with what we're talking about.
People who are dreaming of coming to IESE, and like, what's one great tip you would give?
Diane.
Ooh,
in the back row.
Yeah, I was gonna go back to a similar idea. I would say just challenge yourself, right? I don't think we do an MBA because it's an investment, time investment, money investment, however we look at it. We don't do it just to have an easy, fun 2 years. It's not the only reason. There's no way. So challenge yourself, because I think that's a great way to learn. It might be by joining clubs, I don't know, doing something you've never done before, speaking up in a class when you thought you were too shy to do that, those types of things. That's a great way to make the most of your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking to hopefuls, my advice would be really get to understand the schools. Read the school's employment reports, read some of what the professors are working on, and talk to people, talk to admissions, but also reach out to someone on LinkedIn that has nothing to do with any of this. Schools tend to say kind of the same things on their websites. So if you're just going on the websites, you're not going to really understand what's happening at these programs. So the more you invest, the better of a decision you're going to make.
And my last advice, I know that this can be quite of a long shot, depending where you're based, but come to campus. I think that if you have the privilege and the opportunity to come, what Mike just said about, the different schools are very different, although we all say the same thing in the website. When you meet the people and when you step foot on campus, you feel it, right? So like it's in your gut, in your heart, in your body. So you feel how you feel, right? If you're comfortable, if you're impressed, if you're not, like a bit blasé. So I think that I know that this is not possible for everyone. We do a virtual campus tour just for people that we do a live campus tour twice a year in case we have one coming up soon. And by the way,
On the date?
November 26th, we have
Got
a
it.
live campus tour. So we literally go around with a mobile phone recording, and Amaka, someone from my team, is the hostess. But if you can, I would highly recommend and encourage you to come to campus, because and to visit other campuses if you can as well, right? Because the vibe really changes and you have to see how you feel. And I think that the campus is a big part of the experience.
To be clear, I don't think anyone would be penalized if they can't come in person, because it's not always easy. As you said, the privilege to come.
Exactly. It is a privilege. Yeah. Please don't feel. I didn't come, by the way. I hadn't come to Europe before coming to. I'm originally from Brazil. I hadn't come to Europe. I had no idea where I was getting myself into. I loved it. And I'm still here.
Clearly, you never
But
left.
I did leave. I went back to Brazil for 4 years, and then they brought me back, and I'm very happy here. But I think that it's very different, right? And it really changes your mind because, as Mike was saying about the hypothesis, right? Like before you test it, it's all assumptions and it's all ideas. And when you come and you feel it, it really becomes real and concrete, right? And this can help you more than help the application. I think it will help on your certainty and commitment to the school.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. That's all the time we have. But Paula, Mike, and Diane, thank you so much for your candor, for your warmth, really good info, insights, and advice for so many MBA hopefuls who think that ESA might be the right place for them. And after today, it just might be proven. So thanks once again. If you liked today's episode, don't forget to give us a little like and subscribe to stay on top of all this great free information from MBA Waves. And for the upcoming schedule, go to mbawaves.com. Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for having